The seasons began to change. Summer turned to fall, the air became crisp, and Max's golden coat grew thicker to guard against the cold. Still, every evening, without fail, he made the same walk to the station and sat under the same wooden bench. His eyes searched each train car as the doors slid open, but no familiar face ever stepped out. And when the last passenger left and the train pulled away, Max would lie down with a heavy breath, wait until the lights dimmed, and then slowly return to his owner's house, now boarded up and empty. James's mother had moved to another town, unable to bear the sight of her son's empty home. But Max stayed behind. The neighbors took notice. A kind woman named Mrs. Talbot from across the street began feeding him leftovers, setting a bowl out by the fence. A teenager named Liam tried to coax him inside during a thunderstorm, but Max slipped away the moment the rain stopped, determined. To get back to the station before the train arrived, he became a fixture, a symbol. Children would wave at him from the windows of the train. Commuters would nod in recognition. Some snapped pictures. Local newspapers picked up the story. Loyal dog still waits at station for missing soldier. It was a tale that tugged at everyone's heart. People started leaving treats, bones, and even toys. But Max never played. He wasn't there for fun. He was there for James. Over time, the station workers grew protective. The janitor, Pete, always made sure the bench was clean. The ticketmaster, Ron, brought an old pillow and tucked it under the bench one winter night. "He's earned a bit of comfort," he muttered, even though he'd never been a dog person before. The community started a small donation box for Max's care. A local vet, Dr. Emerson, offered free checkups whenever Max needed. Still, Max refused to let anyone leash him or take him home. No matter how well someone treated him, he always returned to the station as if guided by some invisible thread pulling him toward the tracks. His loyalty became something sacred, untouched by time or comfort. Then came the second anniversary of James's disappearance. The town held a memorial service for the local soldiers who had not returned. James's name was carved into a stone near the town square. People gathered with candles, placing flowers by the names. Max didn't attend. That night he sat at the station as always, his tail still, his head resting on his paws, his eyes watching as another train came and went. "He doesn't know he's gone?" Mrs. Talbot whispered to Liam, who stood beside her. "Or maybe he just refuses to believe it." And maybe that was true. Maybe Max knew something no one else did. Because thousands of miles away, in a barely lit cell hidden deep in foreign mountains, a weak and injured James Carter was still alive. Scarred but not broken. A survivor. His captors thought no one was coming for him. They were wrong. But time moved slowly. And as the years dragged on, the only thing that held James together was a memory. A house on a quiet street. A soft golden coat. A loyal friend who would sit by the door and wait, no matter what. And far away, on the other side of the world, Max continued to wait. Through rain, through snow, through the years. He didn't understand absence, but he understood love. And that was enough to keep him going. As the years passed, Max's presence at the station became a quiet kind of magic, so ordinary it became extraordinary. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a ritual, a reminder, a small miracle wrapped in fur and silence. Every evening, without being told, he showed up at the same time. Never too early, never too late. Like clockwork. Passengers grew to expect him. Strangers would pause mid-step, glancing toward the bench to see if he was there. Tourists began asking, "Is this where the waiting dog sits?" Some brought treats, others took photos, but most simply stood in respectful silence as Max scanned the arriving trains with that same aching hope. Station workers had grown fiercely protective. Pete, the janitor, once yelled at a drunk man who tried to chase Max off. "You leave him be. He's done more for this town than you ever will." After that, people treated the dog almost like royalty. A small plaque was even nailed to the bench, reserved for Max, a friend who waits. Still, Max remained unchanged by the attention. He didn't beg for food, didn't bark or whine. He simply sat. Sometimes he stood and took a few steps when a train rolled in. Sometimes his ears perked when a soldier stepped off the platform. But every time, when it wasn't James, Max would lower his head and return to his spot beneath the bench. His routine was so precise that people planned around it. Kids would race down from school just to catch a glimpse of him. Elderly folks brought blankets in the winter. One artist, inspired by the sight, painted a watercolor of Max waiting under a snow-dusted sky. The image went viral online and brought more visitors to Elmridge. But while the world was inspired, Max didn't care about fame. His world had ended the moment James didn't come back, yet he refused to accept it. There was no closure, no final goodbye. In his heart, James was simply late, and Max would keep waiting, no matter how long it took. Back at James's old house, weeds had overtaken the yard. The mailbox rusted shut, but Max still visited it every morning before heading to the station. He'd sniff the doorframe, circle the porch, then trot off as if making sure everything was still in place, ready for James's return. Harold, a retired postman who lived nearby, had taken it upon himself to care for Max during the day. He placed a clean bowl of water on the porch each morning and set out food. "He's got more loyalty in him than half the people I know," Harold often said to no one in particular. He didn't try to bring Max inside. He knew better. This dog wasn't looking for a new home. He was waiting for the old one to come. Despite the love and support from the community, the years began to wear on Max. His golden fur dulled with age. A limp developed in his back leg, likely from an old injury. Yet he never missed a day. Even in heavy snow or harsh wind, Max found his way to the bench, lying there with eyes half closed but ears always alert. Then, one December evening, something strange happened. As the 6:15 train arrived, Max stood quickly. His tail twitched once, twice. He took a step forward, then froze. A man stepped off the train, same build, same uniform, same walk. But it wasn't James. Max stared for a long moment, then slowly returned to his spot. That night, as Harold approached with a fresh blanket, he noticed Max didn't lift his head. He just stared at the tracks long after the train had gone. Harold knelt beside him and whispered, "You're still hoping, aren't you, boy?" Max didn't move, but his silence said everything. By the third year, Max was no longer just Elmridge's story. He had become a national symbol. A news segment aired titled, "The Dog Who Never Gave Up." People across the country were moved to tears. Letters poured into the town hall. Some sent money to care for Max. Others wrote messages of encouragement and hope. Children sent hand-drawn pictures of golden retrievers and soldiers returning home. The town created a small display board inside the station where people could leave. Notes for Max or James, many simply read, "Come home soon." Despite the growing attention, Max remained the same. Calm, steady, focused. One day, a woman arrived by train, carrying a leash and wearing a serious expression. She was a volunteer from a nearby rescue shelter. She had read about Max and come to see him herself. After watching him for an hour, she approached slowly and knelt by the bench. "Hi, Max," she whispered. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Max glanced at her but stayed still, eyes fixed toward the tracks. "I've got a beautiful home," she said softly. "Warm fireplace, a big backyard. You'd be so happy there." Her words were kind, her offer genuine. But as she reached out to gently slip the leash around his neck, Max stood and took a single step backward. The rejection was quiet, but firm. She paused, smiled sadly, and said, "Okay, I understand." As she stood up, Harold approached. "He's not ready to go anywhere," he said gently. "He's not waiting for a better life," the woman replied. "He's waiting for the life he had." Back at James's home, Harold kept up the daily visits. The lawn remained untamed, the windows dust-covered. Yet Harold refused to let it crumble. "If James ever comes home, I want him to recognize it," he said once while repainting the porch rail. Some thought he was wasting his time, but Harold believed in the impossible, just like Max did. Then came a letter, one that would stir the quiet pain everyone had tried to bury. It was from the military, official-looking, stamped and sealed. It was addressed to James's mother but forwarded to Harold through the town clerk. Inside was a report, newly declassified. A witness, a rescued soldier, claimed that James had been captured, not killed. According to the report, James had been seen alive as recently as 6 months earlier in a remote camp before being moved to an unknown location. The town was stunned. Whispers ran through every shop and street corner. Could it be true? Could James actually be alive? The news reignited a fire in Elmridge. People rallied for updates. James's mother, now living with relatives, wept at the possibility. The town mayor contacted veterans organizations and support groups, asking them to pressure the military for answers. But through all the noise, Max remained the same. Every evening, just before sunset, he took the same path, arrived at the same bench, and watched the same trains. The town watched him with new eyes now, no longer as a tragic figure, but a quiet hero who had never lost hope. One particularly stormy evening, Pete the janitor found Max soaked, his fur heavy with rain. He tried to coax him under shelter, but Max wouldn't budge. He sat, shivering slightly, eyes locked on the platform. Pete threw up his hands and chuckled bitterly. "You know something the rest of us don't, huh, boy?" Max didn't answer, of course. But as the wind howled and lightning flashed, he remained unmoved, like a monument to love. And somewhere, in a jungle hundreds of miles away, James Carter, gaunt, injured but alive, clutched a torn photo of a golden retriever. He looked to the sky and whispered, "Hang on, Max. Just a little longer." James Carter hadn't spoken to another American in years. Inside the dimly lit prison hut, time moved like molasses. Day and night blurred together. There was no clock, no calendar, only routine. Morning meant stale bread and muddy water. Evening meant silence and darkness. His captors were ghosts, appearing and vanishing without a word. They thought they had broken him, but James still had something they couldn't take. Max. Every night after the guards disappeared, James would take out the tattered photo he had managed to keep hidden in the sole of his boot. It was the only surviving memory from home. Max sitting on their porch, tongue out, ears perked. The edges of the picture were worn soft from years of folding and unfolding, but Max's eyes still shone through. It was that image, more than any prayer, more than any hope, that kept James breathing. "I bet you're waiting for me, aren't you?" James whispered each night. "Just like I'm waiting to get back to you." One day everything changed. A low rumble shook the earth beneath the compound. Gunfire erupted in the distance. Explosions cracked through the air like lightning. For the first time in years, James heard English, real clear English, from outside his cell. "Move in! Secure the area!" His heart raced. He scrambled to the bars of his cage, shouting until his throat burned. Moments later, the door burst open. 2 soldiers stormed in, rifles raised. Their eyes widened. "Carter? James Carter?" He couldn't answer. His voice cracked, overwhelmed with disbelief. That night, under a foreign sky, James stood on solid ground as a free man. He had survived. The impossible had happened. But the only thing he could think about, the first thing out of his mouth after being rescued, was his dog. "Is Max still alive?" The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. "We don't know, sir, but we can find out," and they did. Back in Elmridge, news of James's survival hit like a lightning bolt. The entire town erupted in celebration. Flags were raised, bells were rung, people cried in the streets. The media returned in full force, headlines reading, "Soldier declared MIA found alive after 7 years, dog still waiting." The phone at the train station rang off the hook. News vans set up outside James's house. But in all the frenzy, one soul remained calm. Max. The morning after the news broke, Harold stood outside James's house, watching as Max sniffed the porch and looked toward the road, tail still and low. It was as if he already knew something had shifted. "Max," Harold whispered. "He's coming home." Max looked up, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes, like the faint memory of a voice. Arrangements were made swiftly. James would arrive on a Sunday evening. The Yai. 7:15 train. It was poetic, perfect, like it had been written in the stars. As the day approached, Elmridge came together like never before. The platform was cleaned. The town mayor organized a welcome. Veterans and families lined the station, American flags in hand. But none of that mattered more than the one figure lying beneath the bench, watching the tracks as he had done for over 2,500 days. Max. He didn't bark. He didn't move. He just waited. As the sun dipped behind the trees, the train whistle echoed through the valley. The platform filled with people. Cameras clicked. Children whispered. The train slowed. Steam hissed. The doors opened. And for one long moment, time stood still. Then Max stood up. His body was older, slower, but his nose twitched with purpose. He stepped forward, scanning the crowd. His ears perked. His tail lifted slightly, and then he saw him. James, thinner, bearded, eyes wide with tears, dropped his duffel bag and sank to his knees. "Max!" he choked out. Max didn't run. He walked. Each step was deliberate, unsure at first, then certain. And when he reached James, he let out one soft bark, a sound no one had heard in years, then collapsed into his arms. The station fell silent, except for the sound of one man sobbing and the quiet whimper of a dog who had waited 7 years for this moment. James didn't let go. As Max leaned into him, years of torment and silence broke like a dam. James clutched the golden fur with trembling hands, burying his face into Max's neck. The crowd stood still, overcome with emotion. Some cried, others smiled through tears. Not a single camera clicked. Even the reporters couldn't bring themselves to disrupt the moment. It felt too sacred, too pure. Harold, standing just a few steps away, blinked hard. He had seen wars, funerals, and homecomings, but this reunion between man and dog, was something else. He waited. Just like he said he would, he whispered to himself. James finally leaned back, holding Max's face in both hands. "You got old, buddy," he said with a shaky laugh. Max's tongue brushed against James's chin in response. It was like no time had passed between them. The mayor stepped forward, gently placing a hand on James's shoulder. "Welcome home, Sergeant Carter. We're honored to have you back." James nodded, rising to his feet with Max still pressed close. "I wouldn't have made it back without him. He kept me alive, from the other side of the world." The ride back to James's home was slow, as dozens of people walked beside him, escorting him like a returning hero. Max trotted just ahead, a little limpy but proud. Children ran alongside, waving flags. Storefronts had signs reading "Welcome home, James" and "Max the hero dog." When they reached the house, James stopped at the gate, overcome with memories. The porch, though repainted, looked exactly how he remembered it. The oak tree in the yard had grown taller. The place still smelled faintly of pine and soil, of home. Harold opened the door for them. "Go ahead," he said softly. James stepped inside, Max beside him. For a moment, everything went quiet. James let his eyes wander across the living room. The dusty photos, the faint scratches on the floor where Max used to play, the old rocking chair his mother loved, it was all still there. Max padded slowly into the center of the room, turned in a circle, and lay down with a deep sigh. James followed, sitting on the floor beside him. "Every night I thought of this," he said aloud. "Coming home. Sitting here with you. I didn't know if I'd ever see it again." Max looked up at him with tired, loving eyes. James's recovery would be slow. His body was thin, his muscles weakened by years of captivity. But he had survived. And now, with Max at his side, he felt like he could survive anything. Over the next few days, the town came to life around them. Neighbors brought food. Veterans visited to welcome James. Children knocked on the door with handmade cards. James accepted it all humbly, but he never stayed far from Max. Every night, the two of them sat on the porch as the sun went down, side by side, like old friends catching up after a long absence. One night, under a sky of soft stars, James said quietly, "They all think I'm the hero. But it was you, Max. You never gave up on me. You didn't move on. You waited." Max let out a quiet grunt, nuzzling closer. There was a peace between them now, the kind that only comes after storms. But in the back of James's mind, something stirred, a question he couldn't ignore. What would he do now? What came next? He had returned from a place most never come back from, but returning was only the beginning. And as James looked down at Max, who had aged so much in 7 years, he knew one thing for sure. They had earned the right to face the future together. The weeks that followed were quiet, but not the lonely kind of quiet James had grown used to. This was the peaceful quiet of Sunday mornings and distant laughter from neighbors' yards, the rustling of leaves instead of prison bars. Max's soft breathing by the foot of the bed instead of the sound of guards shouting in a foreign language. It was unfamiliar at first, like waking up in a dream that felt too good to be true. James had trouble adjusting. After 7 years of survival, his body was free, but his mind was still trapped in rhythms of caution and silence. He'd wake up gasping in the middle of the night. Sudden sounds made him flinch. He often forgot how to relax, how to smile. But Max was there. Every morning, like he'd done for years, Max waited at the front door at 7 a.m., as if ready to go to the train station. James would open the door and follow him outside. They'd walk the familiar roads around Elmridge, slowly, taking in the world together. No leash needed. Max stayed by James's side like a shadow. People in town never pushed. They waved, smiled, offered small kindnesses. They understood. James had come home with more than scars on his skin. He carried the weight of years stolen. The local VA hospital sent a counselor named Dr. Marla Hayes. She was patient, soft-spoken, and never once treated James like he was broken. At their first session, James was quiet for 20 minutes before he simply asked, "Do you believe a dog can save a man's life?" She smiled. "I don't just believe it, I've seen it." James talked more after that. Each week he unpacked another layer of pain. Some stories he could share, others were too raw, buried too deep. But Max was always there for those sessions, curled at his feet, watching, listening. A constant reminder that even in the darkest times, love had waited for him. James started fixing up the house next. Small things at first, tightening screws, painting shutters, replacing bulbs. It became therapy, a way to rebuild what time had worn down. Max followed him room to room, often lying near his tools, head resting on old shoes or paint cloths. One afternoon, while clearing the attic, James found a dusty wooden box. Inside was Max's old collar, some of James's army letters, and a Note written in his own handwriting, dated 8 years earlier. If I don't come back, please take care of Max. He's family. James sat down hard, the weight of that memory hitting him like a wave. He remembered writing that letter the day before deployment. At the time, it felt like a formality, but reading it now, knowing Max had never needed anyone else to care for him, knowing he had waited instead of moving on, it broke something in him and healed something else. The town asked if they could honor Max officially. A statue, a ceremony. James politely declined. He doesn't need any of that, he told the mayor. He already got what he waited for. But Elmridge insisted on doing something. So they hosted a quiet gathering in the town square. No stage, no speeches, just neighbors, veterans, children, and one elderly golden retriever who sat in front of James the whole time. The plaque they unveiled read simply, "To Max, for his loyalty, his love, and his weight." James knelt beside him that evening and whispered, "They're proud of you. I am too." Max licked his hand, then leaned his head against James's knee. He was slower now, weaker, but his heart was as steady as it had ever been. James looked out over the town, finally able to see his future, not just as a soldier who came home, but as a man who'd been saved by something as simple and powerful as loyalty. And it wasn't over yet. The seasons changed around Elmridge, and with them life moved forward, but never far from the memory of what had been endured. James and Max slipped into a rhythm again, one shaped by quiet mornings and gentle walks, by shared meals, and the unspoken understanding only years of waiting could build. Max didn't run anymore. His legs stiffened when it was cold, and some mornings he had trouble rising from his bed. But James was always there to help, crouching down, whispering, "Easy, old boy, I've got you." There was a softness to those days, not because things were perfect, but because they were earned. James began speaking at local schools, invited by teachers who wanted their students to hear about more than battles and medals. He never talked about the darkest details. He spoke about resilience, about waiting, and about a dog who never gave up on him. Some heroes wear uniforms, he would say, but some just wait at a train station for years without knowing if the one they love is ever coming home. The students loved Max most of all. When James brought him in, the entire room would go still. Max would sit near the desk, tail swishing slowly, and listen as if he understood every word. But James knew Max was tired. He saw it in the way Max paused more often, the longer naps, the deep sighs he let out at night. The vet confirmed it. Max's heart was strong, but his body was beginning to fade. "He's got time," the vet assured him. "But he's not the same pup who waited at the station." James nodded. "He's more than that now." One autumn evening, as the leaves fell like whispers across the yard, James sat on the porch with Max at his feet. The sunset stretched in gold and orange, bathing the town in warmth. Max's head rested against James's boot. "I used to think I was alone in that camp," James said aloud. "But you were with me, every night. You never stopped waiting, never stopped believing." Max didn't move, but his ears twitched gently at the sound of James's voice. "I got out because I held on to you," James continued. "And now you're holding on for me." The words caught in his throat. He reached down, stroking Max's fur slowly, memorizing the feel of it under his fingers. "I'm not scared anymore," he whispered. "Not of the dark, not of being alone. You taught me how to come back to life." As the stars began to scatter across the sky, James rose, gently lifting Max into his arms like he had when Max was a puppy. They sat inside together, beside the fireplace, surrounded by old photographs and warmth. James held a blanket over both of them, and Max leaned into him, his breathing slow and steady. The fire crackled softly. James whispered a story from years ago, the one about when he first brought Max home, how the pup had tripped over his own paws and barked at his own reflection. Max gave a faint wag of the tail, as if remembering too. And for the first time in a long while, James fell asleep without nightmares. He woke in the middle of the night to silence. Max lay beside him, still and peaceful, his head resting on James's knee. James knew immediately. There were no tears at first, just a stillness, a reverence. He placed a hand on Max's head and smiled through the ache. "You did it, boy," he said softly. "You waited, and I made it home." Outside, the wind rustled the trees. A train passed through Elmridge in the distance, its horn echoing faintly, like a final goodbye. Max was gone, but his weight, his loyalty, his love, had changed everything. The morning light came softly through the curtains, painting the room in gentle gold. James sat quietly on the edge of the bed, Max's empty spot beside him, a heavy reminder of what was lost, and what was never forgotten. The town of Elmridge mourned with him. News of Max's passing spread quickly. The same people who had cheered when James returned now came to offer condolences. Flowers appeared on the porch, cards filled with kind words. The mayor arranged for a small memorial at the town square, the same spot where the plaque honoring Max's loyalty had been unveiled. James attended, standing with a quiet dignity that hid the storm inside. He watched children lay fresh flowers, veterans bow their heads, and neighbors place paw prints in wet cement, a permanent tribute to the dog who had waited 7 years. At the memorial, James spoke softly. "Max taught me what it means to wait, to hope, and to love without question. He showed me that sometimes the greatest strength comes from simply being there, waiting, believing, never giving up." His voice cracked, but he kept going. In his own way, Max saved me. Not just from a distant prison, but from losing myself. He reminded me that home isn't just a place, it's the people, and sometimes the dogs who never stop waiting for you. After the ceremony, James walked home slowly, tracing the familiar path with a bittersweet heart. Inside the house, he found comfort in the small things. Max's worn collar hanging by the door, the empty food bowl in the kitchen, the favorite blanket folded neatly on the couch. Each item told a story of loyalty, patience, and unconditional love. James knew he would never forget Max. The dog had been more than a pet. He was a guardian of hope, a symbol of resilience, a friend who had never abandoned him. But the story wasn't over. In the weeks that followed, James began volunteering at the local animal shelter, helping dogs who needed second chances. He shared Max's story with every visitor, hoping to inspire others to see the power of waiting and loyalty in their own lives. One afternoon, while walking through the shelter's yard, James noticed a young golden retriever watching him from behind the fence. The dog's eyes were bright, filled with curiosity and trust. Max's eyes. James knelt down and whispered, "Hey there, buddy. Ready for your own story?" The dog wagged its tail and took a tentative step forward. For James, it was a new beginning, proof that love never really ends. It only grows, passed on through the lives it touches. As the sun set on Elmridge, James felt a quiet peace settle in his heart. He had lost Max, but he had gained so much more: the courage to live again, the strength to heal, and the hope to love once more. Because waiting, he had learned, was never just about the time. It was about faith, about the bonds that hold us together, even when everything else falls apart. And that was a story worth telling.